it's always a work in progress. It's not that we don't have the right systems, but you're trying to manage these three different, heads, these three different issues that come up. And sometimes you don't do the best that you do. So learn from your mistakes, move on, and put in the best systems that take care of those three things. If you take care of those three things, a lot of the other issues that come up from a production standpoint don't won't really matter to you.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Path to Passive Real Estate Investing for Tech Professionals. Welcome to the show. Give me a little bit of background. You know what? Don't give me a little background. I want to acknowledge right away, a couple things that when I was doing research and just getting to know you a little bit better, I thought was really cool. So 0 to 100 million in 3 years, over 100 or 1,100 restored or new construction projects, raised over 30 million from accredited investors and institutional investors, and produced over 400 million real estate sales and completed projects. Dude, pretty cool stuff, man. But, none of this stuff happens overnight. We're going to get into some of your story. There's been some, life lessons, we'll call, some downturns, but some upturns. And you've got a great philosophy that we're, just talking about too, not distressed properties, but distressed people and taking care of community impact and income. So as we get into this, tell me a little bit about how you got into real estate.
Well, real estate, I got here because I just failed forward, right?
Hmm.
So you recognize, you have these dreams when you're a young man and you want to pursue those dreams. And I started out swinging a hammer early on in
Mm-hmm.
like 95, 96. And you quickly go through that progression. Well, I'd like to do something more and I want to be better. And so I went from swinging a hammer for somebody else and not being paid that well. And I probably would have stayed a lot longer if I would have just been treated well and paid well. I think those are two important distinctions in life that
Yeah.
we get comfortable with salaries and hourly rate. But I wanted to be treated well, and I felt that the best position to do that is for myself. So quickly got into contracting, moved up to the GC world, and just
Mm-hmm.
dominated that world for 8 years up until 2008. And I just had an unfortunate situation where my customers weren't paying me, and my customers are who I am today, which is real estate investors. And so
Yeah.
they stopped paying me. They were having difficulties. I lost all my customers, except for one big one, and I, closed down the organization. And the next day we started a new one. I took out a second on my house of $140,000. I owed at that point $2 million, right? And I took 140 of that. I think I needed like 18 of it personally, me and my wife, and we put 122 back into the new business. But I paid some of the old business's debts and vendors,
Gotcha.
and I
To keep
quickly,
afloat.
I just like made a decision right then and there that I was going to repay all those vendors and take care of the people along the way. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those defining moments. You have the corporate world and you have the business world and you have the legal world, but you
Sure.
also in life you have to have a personal world, and we have a
Yeah.
responsibility to take care of things. There's always ways out of projects and all those things. The law provides that for all of us, but we also have a responsibility to take care of people. So I just quickly set up a payment plan with all those vendors and then said, by the way, moving forward, we're going to pay you timely and often if you'll continue and you'll accept anything that we owed in reserve. So over the next 5 years up through 2013, we spent that time mostly paying people back, but just dominating the fix and flip market ourselves,
Nice.
and got to be known as the builder. I actually had like investors come up to me on multiple occasions, which was kind of cool because debt was not being offered, and just said, "Hey, I've seen you dominate the marketplace so well. We're just going to give you our money instead of competing with you."
Damn. I mean, there's the personal aspect you're talking about is really personal ethics,
Yeah.
and that trust in community. Obviously, people coming to you and saying, hey, not only dominating, but you have that personal ethics as well. Really does go a long way. I know it's a bigger mission we'll talk about today too, about impact and income, and we'll get into different models you do. But so you went through really a lot of that, and you were dominating, but also, there's something, sort of a tagline I saw on your LinkedIn as well, which is, some pretty big numbers here. Tell me a little about this. Is that you have your opening, which is 5 years ago. I lost everything and was 28 million in debt. What? Talk to me about how that ties into this story.
Well, listen, the marketplace. We were a luxury home builder in the Portland market, and it was all infill. And if you understand infill, you go in and we would demolish an asset and then place another one right in its spot. So you'd buy a
Okay.
property for $300,000-$400,000. You'd
Hmm.
demolish the asset, and then you would build a brand new house in its location and sell it for $1.5 million, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
I was going down that road and doing very, very well. We had raised a bunch of money, but the market started to turn, and properties that we could sell for $1.5 million turned into 115. So 150, $1,150,000. Well, that's a $350,000 difference, right?
Yep.
And we had to quickly then turn around and change our marketplace and say, okay, it's not only we're going to do luxury homes, but we're going to do luxury rentals, and we're going to get into short-term rentals. So we quickly started doing that. We just ran out of time. And eventually my investors approached me and said, hey, in a not so nice way, we need to liquidate this. This needs to go.
Got it.
So we did. And you know, I didn't want to really do it, but it's a great life lesson that I've continued to learn, and I learned the not just the true understanding of being a servant, but also the understanding of if you want to go through something, you can always go through it. It just depends on the pain in which you want to take doing so. So I looked at
Sure.
that situation and kind of pouted for a while and said, what do I really want to do? And I started noticing these distressed assets around us.
Mhm.
And I started looking at my own distressed situation and how I lost money and, had to liquidate my stuff. And I said, there is always going to be distressed people around distressed asset.
Mhm.
And I just had hoped that somebody would have stuck their hand out and helped me. And nobody really did. So learning the life lesson of that is how do we design a better system? And a week after I closed down the portfolio, I wrote out a plan of what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. And it's really uncanny because a lot of things I write down in my life
Mhm.
actually always come to fruition. It's probably 1 in 100, it's every single situation. And I'll look back at my notes and say, holy smokes, look what I said. But I
Yeah.
built that business today. It's exactly like what I said. It's the structures like it. So we changed our structure. We allowed investors to invest directly into our assets. And then we added a fund structure around that. And with no money and nothing, we went out and I started making offers to distressed people. And my first person that we made an offer to was actually a joint venture of these
Mhm.
4 brand new homes on the hillside that had been condemned by the city.
Mhm.
And that group of projects was my springboard into some more luxury homes, into a 70 unit subdivision that we own today. It was
Nice.
a springboard into a multifamily deal. All of these properties were bought with $0, with um, zero equity, and it was just a matter of helping the people out in their situation. And I can tell you every asset that I own, and we own 182 assets today. Every
Outstanding.
asset that I own has been bought with that principle, which is how can I help those who are in distress and remove that distress from them, in exchange for my expertise and my know-how. That's all it
Yeah.
has been.
Solving problems. I mean, that's kind of the essence of quote unquote creative financing as well. But I don't want to label that here, but I am curious, what does that look like? To as much as maybe you can share, like you're talking about, you know, basically buying with no money, right? Other people's money. Is that about right?
Yeah. So in a distressed deal, when you have distressed people, right, it's rarely about the asset. So the asset has known values. And so let's
Mhm.
say that this just use real numbers. Um, we bought an asset for $3.5 million. It was a subdivision, a whole subdivision. And we found a lender that would give us $2 million for it and a little bit of money to do improvements from a plan standpoint, from a permitting standpoint. We then took that and we made the seller our partner that made up that difference, right?
Got it.
So the seller was in distress.
Yep.
They couldn't make their monthly payments. They were going to get foreclosed upon by somebody.
Yep.
And we just brought in somebody that would repay all of their debt off, give them a little bit of walking around money.
Yep.
And then we applied their $1.5 million to our capital stack.
Yep.
And our
Got it.
capital stack ends up on that property being $5 to $6 million from an equity standpoint. So they make up roughly a quarter of the capital stack, which gets half of the profits. So on a whole, they receive 12.5% of the overall profits of the project for that structure.
So you really do make the people distressed become a partner in a way as well.
You have to. And
Yeah.
you just kind of think that through about what that looks like. You're taking something that's a highly negative situation and turning it into something positive.
Absolutely, because you see what it could be, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so often, so if you go the reverse on that and you say, okay, the bank takes that asset back, and the bank comes in and they take the asset back, rarely are you going to be able to get into that asset for $2 million. You might have to get into it because you're bidding against all these other people and you might see a $3.5 million, right? So we
Yep.
actually pick up the asset for a lot less too. So
Hmm.
not only and that's what I call the creative destruction of life or of real estate. So creative destruction is we kind of pull everything down, we put something new into it, but we don't fully destroy what is there. The moment that you fully destroy something that is there, that I'm just going to start over from ground zero, which is what the distress asset play, you destroy the
Hmm.
real value that was there. And we don't want to negate the real value that was there.
Got it. There's some there's some philosophical aspects there for sure. Right. Uh to needless to say, I know one of the quotes it looks like it's important to you is there's creative intelligence in those who fall, only to be rebirth in life's production. And it sounds like that's kind of in theme with that.
It's totally in
Um
theme with that there is a creative aspect where you're able to strip apart the things that aren't working. It's much like a winemaker. If the vine is not productive, then you prune the vine back, but you don't destroy the whole vine. You just take the portion that is not productive.
yeah. And there's some great wine in southern Washington too, right?
There is. Well, the whole
Uh,
Willamette Valley's got the best Pinot in the world. So if you ever want to come out to the Willamette Valley, you'll see some of the best wines in the world.
Yeah, I actually lived in Seattle for 9 years. My
Oh
brother was there in
yes,
Portland, so
yeah,
I got to a couple times. So I hear you, man. I'm really curious. You talked about that subdivision that you bought, but I also know that luxury homes are a big part of the brand, your company, right?
yeah,
And so you work with investors that can invest direct into projects, but also into the fund itself.
yep.
But before we get into that part, direct to project or to fund, how does luxury homes fit into this?
Well, listen. I grew up in this business doing luxury homes, and
Okay.
it's just in 2008, it was the only thing that I could sell. Everything else was not selling. because there was no money, right? So when we have situations where you have a scarcity of funds,
Mm-hmm.
luxury tends to still be there.
Sure.
So there's a certain price point in luxury that stays there and still wants to buy. So that was the first. I call it the hedge because that's really what it is. It's not just about luxury homes, it's about the hedge, which is
Talk to me about that.
if you have a group of people that will always buy your asset, regardless of what's going on in the marketplace,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a profit distribution that is beneficial to all parties involved, whether it's your lenders, vendors, and investors, right? Because that's what
Yeah.
makes up every transaction is lender, vendors, and investors. So if I can protect my investors and my lenders and my vendors, then I can have a system that is sustainable long term.
Yeah, your value stream still works out all
Yes,
the way to the customer. And so, in a way, the luxury goods or luxury homes in this case, it's kind of an uncorrelated asset in a lot of ways, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
And listen, we
that's
have a
pretty
like
cool.
I said, we have a responsibility to be good stewards to those who we surround ourselves with, who we pay, whether that's investors, vendors, or lenders. So being a good
Hmm.
steward means that you're designing systems that are effectively bulletproof long term. And that's just one of the effective ways, which is luxury assets. We also have, believe it or not, Section 8 housing. We have 84 units that are Section 8 housing in in some of the northern states, up in Pennsylvania and up in Detroit. And that's a different play, right? And that's
Hmm.
an impact play. And that's it's not because I necessarily love that asset play, but here's what I love is that when the economy goes down and it's not doing as well, we see that the governmental assistance in on an asset is a positive thing. And
Yep.
providing housing to those who are less fortunate also fits with my view, which is we are our brother's keeper. So we take care of other people in what we're doing. And you can build great business models, making sure that you're doing what you can in society to do so.
Absolutely. I agree, especially from both sides of, we'll say, taking care of the community. There's opportunity to take care as well as for everyone to uh, it seems almost callous, but to profit
Yeah.
with homes, profit with that, and to build that, for everyone. But let's talk a little bit about that. Was luxury homes where you had already learned about, and that's where you were. Is that where you were swinging hammers on before as well?
When I started, I was in kind of that midpoint, not so much. But once I got into being a GC for all the investors, it
Yep.
was mostly was on the higher end side of houses. So you'd
Okay.
buy it from you. We might buy a house, or they might buy a house for $200,000 at that point. Put $200,000 in and do it for six. When like today we'll buy a house for 400, put 300 into it, and it's probably worth 1.2 to 1.1, somewhere in that price point.
Got it. Okay. So talk to me about the two different offerings that you have. Your investors that you work with can invest direct to a project, or they can go into the fund. And I've seen there's many different types of projects that investors can invest directly into. Is like you have the single family stuff, you have multifamily, entire developments. You even have stuff out there in Detroit, which I thought was interesting. I have some properties out there too, Pittsburgh, etc. So what does this look like?
Well,
Is
don't
this
forget
kind of
about
like
the
a
net zero play either. So that's an impact. So we do net zero. So we have a line of net zero homes coming out in multifamily play. So that's all around. I don't call it green because to me it's a much more personal thing. I did a post about this today on LinkedIn, but it was
Mhm.
really about how is it that we produce a lot of oil. We've got an energy problem in the sense that we buy a lot of oil from, and this isn't a political statement. This is what we do. We buy oil from people who we may or may not like, right? And so how do we help solve that issue? In one of the ways that we can contribute to that is net zero play, which is the homes will produce as much as they consume. And that's a big deal because that gets back to community, and it also gets back to how do we make our community better? Well, if I've got a house that produces energy and you have an energy need and you're next door, then the power goes from my system into the grid
Mm-hmm.
and over to your house effectively. That's what
Nice.
happens, right? So, and you get enough of people doing that, then you can have systems that are not reliant upon these big industrial power
Sure.
plants and so on. So that's
Yeah.
kind of the play here.
That's the
But
entire neighborhood,
what's that?
and that would be the entire neighborhood.
If we're doing a subdivision, then it's a whole neighborhood. If we are doing a house, an individual house, then it's that individual house.
How would that so how would that individual house get power to its neighbors, as an example?
Well, as an example, so the way that it works in the Northwest is that your meter will actually run backwards when you produce energy on your house,
Okay.
right? So your
Interesting.
energy
Yeah.
runs, and so the energy actually goes back into the grid. So effectively, you're helping the grid or sustain the grid um, from its
Yep.
general life. And I compare it to what I call decentralized energy, which is you
Sure.
have all these points. Like right now we're talking on like a decentralized internet, which is we all
Mm-hmm.
have these internet connections, but together we make up this collective, right?
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing with decentralized energy. If every house has its own energy source or its own power source, how can we make that work? And how can we help out our fellow human beings without doing anything other than investing in our own asset?
So this is taking a completely different turn than I thought would go, but I absolutely love this. As I mentioned, where this is for tech professionals, my colleagues, my the people that this is really for to listen to, and things like you know uh, decentralized internet, DeFi, and anything else like that is the I wouldn't say the day to day, but you could pick someone out of the room in a tech room and have a conversation like this. So I love that we're talking about this on an energy perspective. So first things first, let's talk about this the component level, Mike. Um,
Sorry,
so
I get
no,
off track sometimes.
no, it's great. How does is this what a bunch of solar panels? How is the property generating energy?
Okay, this is a really cool concept, and it is very applicable depending on where you live in the United States. One
Okay.
is we're doing it through solar, very simple, very easy to understand. Number two is we're doing it through wind turbines. So maybe your house has a wind
Hmm.
turbine up on its roof. And there's these
Okay.
cool, like some of the new technology around wind turbines is pretty fabulous, right? So, and you can produce as much power with a wind turbine as you can your solar. And then the last one, which is something we're developing from a technology standpoint, is utilizing water. If you live in areas that get a lot of rain, to
Hmm.
create a technology play that will spin a turbine, much like a dam does, up on your roof, utilizing gutters. So it's kind of a
Hmm.
cool thing and how it works. It's still in its infancy, but those are the three areas. And then the last two is just how can we utilize really efficient windows. So you're looking for an R5 window. A normal window in your house, if you just bought a brand new house, might be an
Hmm.
R2.5. That's the value that it gives. So we're doing double that with the windows that we put into the units. And you can do that through different gases inside the panes, or
Hmm.
you can go up to a three-pane window.
So what does that R coefficient stand for here? Like what does that letter mean? And more importantly, I mean, the is this like you say with different gases? Is this within the glass itself?
Yeah, so it's
Um,
just argon gas in the middle of the pane. So it's nothing.
okay.
The bottom line is we're just using a really efficient model. This is no different than utilizing a Yeti or a thermos versus an
Hmm.
open container like a cup,
Okay.
right?
Got it. Insulation, basically.
Insulation. That's
Okay.
all this
Okay.
is. So creating better insulating value with the building envelope is number one.
Hmm.
Um, and that helps us. And so you're kind of sealing the unit. If I take a standard, I'm trying to think of the new Stanleys, right? They've got a cap on them and they screw on, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So that has an R value and it keeps water inside either warm or cold depending on what you
Hmm.
made it already. So the
Right.
efficiency of that is far better than if I have an open container, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
houses that were built 50 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago is that example. They're open containers. They got a lot of airspace that gets in and out. So you're not only heating the inside of the house, but a lot of times you're heating the outside because of the intrusion of other air coming inside the house. So keeping it nice and efficient ensures that your cost and your energy use is cut in half, for example.
Right, cut in half, but I heard you correctly that there are cases where the amount of energy could be that is created or generated could be as much as the house uses as well to be net zero, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. Do you see a point where that can be, the house generates more than its usage?
I would say, depending on your climate and depending on where the further south you get in the United States, the more likely is that to happen. I
Sun?
believe we can get between wind and solar and water in the Northwest or the Northeast. We can definitely get there, but it's going to be slightly different. As you get into the South and Southwest or the
Hmm.
Southeast, it's a lot easier because of the number of days of sunlight. But here's something that we're doing that is around technology as well. Is we put battery packs in the houses as well. So when you have peak at the peak of when you're producing your energy, you're storing your energy as well. So then when you don't need it, you have that stored power.
Yep. Is this only working for new builds? And I mean, I know they retrofit houses with, solar and stuff, but I actually don't know the numbers. I guess I'll just ask the question at face value. Does this setup only work with brand new home builds, first of all?
No, it actually will work with the full rehab, but you do have to do a full rehab. So you have to go in there and you have to re-insulate the houses and you have to provide high efficiency windows. And then you're just
Yeah.
plug and play. I mean, listen, you can go onto Amazon these days and for $10,000 buy a system, a solar system with a battery
Hmm.
pack and an inverter for very inexpensively and have somebody install it for you. Or you can go to any of the solar providers and have them do what they do. But there are a lot of options out there in today's world, and especially when you're if we do it in a subdivision, it's one thing. If you do it on an individual house, it's possible too as well.
I can tell you're not passionate about this at all. So, uh,
Well,
so
most people
um,
listen. Most people make this into a political debate. It's not a debate. It's of how do we make our communities better, right?
yeah.
That's all this is. This is one is are we going to reduce everything? Or we? I like it for my own reasons. You know what I like? I like the decentralized part of energy.
Hmm.
And I'm going to tell you because you buy a house, and if you've ever dealt with, maybe you've never dealt with this, you buy a house and you got a 30-year mortgage, and the next thing you know, your electricity bill is $350 for the month.
Sure.
Well, it's a lot easier if I can put that on a 30 or 40-year loan and recoup the energy as I produce it. That's a lot
Yep.
easier and a lot easier to manage. But what happens when you only make $5,000 a month and your energy bill is $350? To me, that's like it's
Easy to do
another
it.
control point for another mechanism to say, hey, you got to pay us some more money because it's required. Nobody just gets out of the utilities, right?
Right. No.
That's what makes me passionate is how can we help people? Because what happens is people become in need and at somewhere in the adventure, let's just get all the cost up front so that we're not spending money later. Like if you understand real estate because you're in real estate, but in real estate, some of the biggest costs are the yearly taxes and the utilities and all of the upkeep. So if we can reduce some of those yearly expenditures
Mhm.
and by putting it in your mortgage, something you know what it is, then to me that's just a better place to be.
Yeah, I mean, two sides of the same coin here, dude. From a tech perspective, absolutely. I mean, it makes sense. I was trying to think about like how would one even make that a political conversation? That's how ignorant I am. You know, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense from technology.
Well,
So
people talk about like they don't like the Green Deal for whatever reason, right? Because they
uh,
or
okay,
here's the other thing. If you're in a gas producing area, you're saying, well, let's just
okay,
pump some more gas.
Sure. Okay, I got you. I
So
got
all
you.
of those things are off the table, right? When you get out of the political discussion, what we do and what can we do for other people and how can
Yeah.
we provide from an engineering and technology standpoint things
Yeah.
that will benefit their long-term viability, and how do we make sure, because here's the biggest thing I believe: if you do what is in the best interest of the asset, which is the property, then you will
Hmm.
always do well, because that'll correlate into doing what's in the best interest of people. I deal with this even on an investor standpoint. When we do what's in the best interest of the asset and we take care of what the asset needs, it will always take care of. When your source of what you're doing in life gets taken care of, everything else works for you.
Yeah, a quote comes to mind: "Life supports things that support more life."
Yes.
Um, and so agreed. I'm so help map this a little more for the listener, then, if you would. So we're talking about this, and this makes a ton of sense. Obviously, in net zero energy, which is great for the planet, for the community. Really, technology, as it continues to get better, it will have in cost, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think that's Moore's law.
Especially
But
batteries the game changer, right? The new batteries they're coming out with are pretty amazing.
okay, talk to me about that, and then bring this full circle about how you work with investors on this.
Yes, and this is what we're here to talk about for sure. So our we came up with the ideas of here's how we protect investors. How do we make an investment long term that makes sense to them? How do we provide a suite of different types of investments, so that, because not everybody has a different risk level and an identity of how they want to invest in, right?
Yep,
So
exactly.
with our system, you can invest in the individual asset. So if you like our 68 unit or 70 unit subdivision, you can invest in that individual asset, right? Easy to do. It's a standard partnership agreement, um,
Straight syndication, basically.
straight syndication, and you make money as the assets. Whenever you have cash advance or whatever, let's say in the 68 unit, we complete production, we make some money on it. That's when you
Hmm.
start getting paid out. And some of them have longer terms. Some of them have 6 months terms, and some of them have 3 to 5 year terms,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
So just depends on what you like. That's that business. And we have 13 different SPVs right now that one could invest in. And
Got it.
we target double digit returns. We can show how we get double digit returns, and we don't touch it unless we know that the investors can get there. And we got ways to show you that. The next way is through our fund structure. Our fund structure is actually an investment in the company itself. So they come in and
Okay.
they invest into the company as a limited partner.
Hmm.
And we pay out a fixed return every 4.5 or every 3 months or every quarter of
Every
four and
quarter,
a half
right?
percent. Very
Got it.
simple, very easy. And the people that like that, they like different things. What's cool about our fund structure is we have 4 different revenue streams that feed into that money to make sure that we can hit those returns. And because we have the multiple revenue stream, and because we're highly vertically integrated, we make money when we buy it, we make money when we build it, we make
Yep.
money if we sell it, and we make money if we rent it.
Cool. I was gonna ask, just for clarity, because I believe I've mentioned on different episodes, vertically integrated when it comes to the acquisition and property management of it. But I saw vertically integrated on a fund and a build level. So I was going to ask you to explain a little bit of that, what that means. So it sounds like, yeah, if you would.
Yeah, so here's what it means. We don't hire other All of our work that we do on the properties is actually our own general contractor. We hold the licenses. So we do the work, or our people do the work. Like right now, I'm one of the marketplaces like Portland. We have
Mhm.
6 employees, full-time employees, and they go around to the 7 or 8 individual homes that we have and build those. When we go to our multifamily play with 14 units, net zero, in the heart of Portland, we'll have vendors on there every day, but we act as that GC for that in doing so. So we
Got it.
build it. So we are able to capture revenue along the way everywhere we go.
Yep. Yep. It's like owning the supply chain, so to speak.
And my friend, if you understand investing, you understand that's the key. Like it's I believe it's hard to screw up in real estate. But wherever we all end up getting into an adverse position is where the cash needs don't meet the cash timing, right? So
Yeah.
interest rates, you have to sell because the lender's telling you you have to sell. A vendor wants his money, so you got to figure out how to get cash out of it. That's where all the problems happen. So we designed a system to get cash all the way through the assets so that we don't run into that same issue.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's that whole idea of how can you turn a liability into an asset, because an asset could, vice versa. So talk to me about this here too. I forget exactly how you said it, but I know you're very passionate about equity and debt. Um, so talk to me about this, because I know there have been times where you've seen it. People have over leveraged, and I think you have this analogy you're talking about with debt like being like the lead at the bottom of a ship. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. It's a pretty good mind picture. So what is this all about, Mike?
No, so I use a ship as an example. So in the New World, right, the 15, 16, 1700s, all the ships from Europe would come over to the South America, North America, and look for
Hmm.
the riches, right?
Yeah.
And so when the boats are coming over, they'd have lead in the bottom. They've had weight in the bottom to weather a storm. And that's what they were concerned with. But also, you have like not the spiritual sense of I'm going over, but everybody's excited about the deal, right? Just like real
Yeah.
estate, you get in all
Sure.
the investors and you get the lenders and you get the vendors, and everybody's excited about it, right? And they bid the
Yeah.
job and they tell their family, hey,
Go buy some
yeah,
stuff.
right? Everybody's happy. Well, that's the same thing with lead. Everybody's happy going over to the New World. And so the ships come over here and they pick up the goods. And one of the things they picked up was gold. And you'd have these big Spanish galleon ships, right, that would put
Hmm.
gold into the bottom of the boat. And I equate it to how investing is in real estate and all the actors and everybody involved. When the boat is coming back, we no longer need the lead because the gold acts or the equity acts as the ballast and the
Okay.
equalizer to all problems. So if you have
Sure.
mutiny on the boat, the captain can go down into the ship, pick up a couple gold coins and flip them to his workers, right?
Hmm.
Well, that's the same thing with cash. You get into the middle of a project and you got your own equity and you're having problems with your lender. You have your own bank account, you have your own cash reserves on hand to pay the bills. And you don't have to worry about what the lender does, right?
Yeah, I agree. So for sure, I like the analogy, but I just it's making sure that we have enough equity in the ship, in
Yes.
the deal as well, so that we can go and use what's any of that equity as needed, so that we can continue to keep things afloat.
Yep. And the
And
lenders will do everything they can, just as your vendors will do, to take whatever cash you have. And that cash typically comes from the lenders. And so, and the other thing is in today's environment, lenders don't really lend anymore. They just don't. What
what do you mean?
lenders do is they reimburse you. Even on my
Uh,
$5 million loans, I got a $5 million loan on a property.
okay,
My lender wants me to pay my vendors first.
right, right.
So I pay
That's
them and then they reimburse us. Or they make
yeah,
you sign some type of document that gives away your life in order to get it. So having your own equity, just like the gold, allows you options. And I've learned the hard way that it doesn't matter what the lenders tell you or the vendors tell you. When they want their money, they get to make the rules. It's like he who holds the gold makes the rules,
that's the golden rule.
right?
Yes, it is.
So
Yeah.
how do we fight? How do we fight that, and how do we make sure that we hold the rules as the borrower? Because you got to think about this: we are the borrower. We are a borrower, and because we're the one guaranteeing all the loans and we're doing everything, we need to have protection. Our protection is equity.
So what's the answer here? Is that making sure that when even if we, get the loans, the lead at the bottom of the ship, so to speak, that we keep enough operating cash flow and we're cash flow in the bank, or how do we think about this?
Yeah, so we got, 4 rules when buying assets. It's a very simple thing, and this is from screwing it up and doing it wrong. I can honestly tell you that. But if you follow
Perfect.
these 4 rules, I don't think you're really going to lose money, and it's hard to lose money if you have any sense to you and you do it 5 or 6 times, you'll always make money. Number one is always take care of people first. So don't buy distressed assets anymore. Look for distressed people, and you're going to have an abundance of real estate coming your way because there's many people who are not going to follow these full rules, and because they're not following the full rules, they're going to find themselves in trouble. So number one, take care of distressed people versus distressed assets, and those properties come to you. Number two is the rule 75, which makes sure that whatever you are in a project, and I'm talking the full amount, don't ever exceed 75% of the value of the property,
Leverage.
right? Well, I'm not only
Got
talking
it.
about leverage, but I'm also talking your own cash, right? So you don't ever want to spend more than 75% of the value. So a simple thing is if the asset is going to be worth $100,000 between
Hmm.
points and interest and vendor pays and purchase, never spend more than $75,000 or 75%.
Got it. So you're talking about always making sure that you have margin,
Yeah, for sure. And
right?
I'm
Because if you
telling you, if
spend
you
more
miss
than that,
this rule, like I've seen a lot of guys. You see them all over social media. They're like, well, let's leverage the hilt out of it. You got to remember, they're wealthy. When you're already wealthy, you can do a lot of things different. But we're
yep,
not talking about being wealthy. We're talking about people. They're selling courses to people who have very little understanding of the ups and downs. So making sure you have proper margin was a hard lesson to me to learn because it it creates a scarcity play. Like if I don't offer, $500,000 for this property, then somebody else is gonna get it at $500,000. And so I'm gonna lose out on that deal.
they're
But
desperate for the deal.
it's so much easier and so much better just to pass on that deal.
Yeah, no deal's better than a bad deal.
It is. Like capital preservation is one of the most important lessons you learn, and let's learn how to preserve capital. So rule
Got it.
75, don't spend more than 75%. Part of that 75 is rule number 3, which is always have multiple months worth of interest reserves on hand so that you can pay the debt notes. If you're going to take on debt, then make sure you have interest reserves, and we look for interest reserves somewhere around 5%. So on $100,000 valuation of a deal, we make sure we have $5,000 to make those interest payments for the next 6 months to a year.
Got it. Cool. I
And
was
then
about to
number
ask that.
4, along those lines, make sure you have 5% cash on hand. And that 5%, once again, is another $5,000. What happens is inherently lenders love to reimburse us instead of be a true lender. And because they're just reimbursers, that $5,000 on a weekly basis and a monthly basis will go to the vendors and to whoever needs money. And then let the lenders reimburse you.
And that's 5% of what?
5% of the
The
value of the property.
of that value.
Yeah.
Got you. We
Because
have
you're gonna, if you've got a job in which you're doing $30,000 in work, and I don't have any, well, I got a couple of $30,000 jobs. Most of them are $200,000-300,000. On a monthly basis, you'll have to pay a vendor at some point, right? And
mhm.
even if they work on terms, I find it better just to pay our vendors early and often. And so we're getting to a 0 day on paying vendors. I'm not there yet. I'm getting close, but we're getting to the point where we can do 0 days where they send us a bill, we can pay them immediately. So, we pay. Our goal is to pay them as soon as possible, and then we apply for the reimbursement of the loan or of the work that's done, and then we get our money back. So we're really not out any more money. We're just utilizing that as cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And the faster you can do it, the everything is just in time,
Yeah,
and money just becomes another commodity of something that moves then.
Yeah. And remember, losing in this game of real estate is all about timing. It's rare that you're going to buy bad assets. In fact, 1 out of 100 assets is going to be bad and you're going to lose on it, or 2 out of every 100. That's just a rule of thumb I have. So you're not going to lose money on ones, but what you will happen is you will have adverse things happen on it. I have had some of the stupidest things happen that have cost me properties before, and you're like, I can't believe this is happening. A little bit of cash on hand when that was happening would have made a huge difference. 30 days is a difference. So it's always about the timing of money. That reserve 5% ensures you should have very few worries at night.
Yeah, money will solve some problems. I'm curious. We don't have to get into it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that come to mind, just things that happen in properties that kind of tank the asset. But those 4 different rules, I absolutely love that. We only have a little bit more time left. I want to make sure I get a couple other rapid fire things that are here. So when you think about um, other ways to contribute impact in income, net zero energy is a big part of that, right? Technology as well. What are some of the other things that you think of when you think about contributing back to communities? I mean, taking care of people, obviously a big one. So that's probably number one, right? Um, but what else do you think of when you're thinking about giving back to communities or things you're passionate about that are just how you do business in a great way?
In a nutshell, you have to build a balance sheet that can support your community and everything that. And what I mean by that, it's the same as the tree of life. You plant a tree, you water it, you watch it grow to tree, it grows the leaves, it grows the fruit. The quicker and sooner you get to the fruit so that you're able to feed other people is the most important aspect of it. So you're taking care of people by building the systems. And in order to take care of other people, you have to have the right systems in place. And it's the number one thing I look at in life is that how quickly can we get to that point where we have a fully evolved system that will take care of others,
What is
including
what?
ourselves.
Yeah, what does that look like? Do you mean like the having things completely built? Do you mean
No, here's for
an
example,
example?
the number one. What is the number one thing that vendors look for? What do you think they look for?
Besides getting paid on time, um, vendors are. I mean, they want trust. So
I think you've already hit it. The number one thing is if you pay them on time.
yes,
So you have to have a system. Don't employ people until you have a system that can take care of them. Because
got
it's
it.
far better to do nothing than to not take care of people when you're hiring them. And
Got it.
so you've got to have the system in place that allows you to do that. And I'm only telling you from personal experience and personal heartache. And I've watched 99.9% of everybody I've known go through most ups and downs, right? And it's ups and downs most of us don't talk about and even convey about, but these are things that affect us highly. And you have people that don't get back up. I got back up. So because I got back up, it's my duty and my responsibility to take care of my vendors. That's
Yeah.
number one. And that means just paying them on time. So let's have a system that acknowledges that they need to be paid on time. Let's also have a system, because this is hard for people to understand. I got to be honest with you, one of the hardest people to convince of this is my lenders. And some of them I do, and some of them I don't. We have a responsibility before anything else is paid to pay the workers that step onto our job sites.
Yeah.
That is number
Absolutely.
one. We have a responsibility. If you've ever been in that position, and most lenders are never in that position
Yeah.
because they don't deal with workers. But when you have somebody that busts their ass all week long and they don't get paid because we
Right.
paid somebody else, that's not okay. Like that,
Exactly.
that to me is worth, I would rather not work if I can't pay them timely. That's how I feel about it. We are to take care of other people. and we can still take care of ourselves. That doesn't negate us. It is in our best interest to take care of them first. So taking care of them, if you look at a lender, what is the lender looking for? They want to have timely, on-time payments, and they want their assets to turn quickly because they've got 6-month loans on them, or 12 months loans, or 5-year loans. So we have to have a system in place, not only that we think they like, but that we like, that will pay them and make sure they get timely payments. And then how do we treat investors well? We give them on-time payments and on-time information. And I haven't always done great at that. And it's always a work in progress. It's not that we don't have the right systems, but you're trying to manage these 3 different, heads, these 3 different issues that come up. And sometimes you don't do the best that you do. So learn from your mistakes, move on, and put in the best systems that take care of those 3 things. If you take care of those 3 things, a lot of the other issues that come up from a production standpoint won't really matter to you.
Mike, thank you. I was going to ask, what are some of the things that you wish you do when you started? But I think we've got so many nuggets along the way. You got right in front of it. So no doubt those have been things that, you have learned along the way, and you were just top of mind. So thank you so much for your time today. We got into some really cool stuff. I wish we had more time. I'd love to have you back on again and talk tech. I think that would be, in this space, I think that'd be really cool. Seems like you're a fountain of knowledge there. But I'd love to know, where can people engage with you? Just where can people find you?
So you can find us on LinkedIn. Mike Hubbell. I'm on LinkedIn. Look under Mike Hubbell. That's 2 B's, 2 L's. You can find me on LinkedIn. Same thing, Mike Hubbell, 2 B's, 2 L's. And then you can go to www.luxlivinghomes.net, which is our website. If you're interested in investment, you want to see some of the cool updates that we're doing. And then also we did start a podcast, but it's very early on. And you can look at our YouTube channel for Mike Hubbell, which is just the podcast. And it's not only podcasts where I talk to people, but it's also about, these are the, I'll talk for an hour about debt. And I know that doesn't sound sexy or cool, but there's a lot of things that people should understand about debt that they don't understand now, and the drawbacks to it. So take a look at our YouTube page, take a look at the webpage, LinkedIn, email, Mike H.
And we're going to have all these in the show notes.
Yes.
I will be tuning in to listen to that debt for an hour, honestly, because I think it is that important. It's one of those things where, learning to use it properly is a game changer. We talk about debt and equity, and just having that as well, some of those different rules, and especially the one of 75. So, Mike, appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks a lot, Steven. Take care, bud.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.